After the snooze fest of the Monaco Grand Prix last weekend, Formula One finally arrives at the home of the Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona. And with it comes the most important round of the championship so far, and potentially for the whole season. And of course, that is all to do with the introduction of the new front wing flex tests on all of the Formula One cars. It is a weekend which could see the pecking order of Formula One for 2025 completely change as a result of it. And as a result of this updated test, all of the teams since the beginning, if not before the beginning of the season, have been hard at work on perfecting the new front wings to make sure they comply with the updated technical regulation changes. So for this weekend, it is not simply just about putting the car out on track in the same sense as it's been across the opening rounds previous to this. It is now a glorified testing ground in a sense, because none of the teams will truly know, that is for the ones that have had a front wing flexing above the current and new guidelines, what their performance will be, as well as just the generalized feel that the cars will have for their drivers. So there is a lot of highly sensitive information and data the teams need to gather across these 3 opening practice sessions of the weekend. Now, just what has changed with regards to these tests the FIA will be undertaking to make sure the front wings of these Formula One cars are in line with the brand new set of regulations from Barcelona onwards. The technical regulations describe the updated testing procedures in articles 3.15.4 and 3.15.5. There are 3 tests that will be carried out across all of the cars this weekend in Barcelona and moving forward. The first test involves the application of a single downward force of 1000 N, which is the equivalent of 100 kilograms of weight, and this is placed on the lower wing profiles, 800 meters lateral in terms of distance from the center line of the car, and the maximum permitted deformation drops from 20 to 15 millimeters, for an increase in the required stiffness of approximately 32%. The second test is similar to the first one, with the difference that the 2 loads of 1000 N each are applied to the 2 sides of the front wing and symmetrically with respect to the central axis. The permitted bending for each of these 2 points goes from 15 to 10 millimeters, which is a correspondence of a 50% increase in stiffening. The last test concerns the upper elements of the front wing flaps, the ones from which we first spotted all of this flexing, which has become a big topic among all the fans of the sport since 2024 at Monza in particular. The procedure for this one in particular is imposing a force of 6 newtons, so a lot less, 6 kilograms, along any point of the rearmost edge of the flap, as well as perpendicular to it. The maximum bend will be reduced from 5 to 3 millimeters, which will be an increase in stiffness of 60%. The profiles will therefore maintain a certain level of deformation, or in simplistic terms, flexibility, taking into account that there is no test that can faithfully replicate the real distribution of aerodynamic load when the car is racing. And of course, there does also need to be a generalized amount of flex within these particular parts of the car because of the huge load placed on them throughout a Grand Prix. And we've got the perfect example of how that can affect any of the teams this season. In this case, we'll be focusing in on the Ferrari team and how they've been setting up their SF25 across individual weekends, with a particular focus on the Monaco weekend as well as Imola, where they experienced contrasting fortunes in performance across the events. Now, if you were to look back across all of the races before we got to Monaco with the SF25, you would say it doesn't have any standout kind of areas or strengths. And I'm talking, traction zones, high speed, medium speed, low speed. The only one you would say is actually the kind of tyre degradation and race pace. But of course, with the issues they have in qualifying and warming the tyres up enough to set a good lap, it leaves them too much to do on a Sunday. So when everyone then of course comes to Monaco, the team, as well as the fans and just fans of the sport in general, do not expect Ferrari to go well at all around there. But in fact, to everyone's surprise, except for myself, maybe a few others, I actually believed they would be quite competitive, as it turned out to be, around the streets of Monte Carlo. And there is a particular reason why that turned out to be the case. And that is purely because there is a less variety of high speed, medium speed and slow speed corners around the track. It mainly consists of either slow speed or medium speed corners. And therefore the compromises a team has to make with regards to setup of their cars is a lot smaller than it would be at a track with a much wider variety of corners. And so that is why you see all of the teams converge to be closer to one another than you would at any other circuit on the calendar. And that is the reason behind Ferrari's very highly competitive weekend. They just have to set their cars up for two specific speed ranges of corners, and therefore it is what we saw throughout that weekend. They were very much on a par with Mclaren, and it was only for Lando Norris's very good pole position time that they managed to get the win on that Sunday. Now, the biggest question heading into the weekend is which team is going to be affected the most by this rule change. At the top of everyone's wish list would be the Mclaren team, the pace setters in 2025. With Red Bull firmly in the camp, believing they will suffer the most from this rule change. Whether that turns out to be right is anyone's guess, but it's easy to understand why the team wants this outcome, with Max Verstappen firmly in the Drivers' Championship hunt in 2025. But you all may be in for quite a shock as to how little this rule change will affect the team, with Zak Brown stating that it will have little to no impact on the performance of their car for this event and beyond. There's been a lot of speculation within technical forums that the team have long since had a front wing that would and will conform to the new stringent tests being introduced this weekend. Could Mercedes be affected the most by it? And there is evidence to support this belief, with the team having already introduced and run their modified front wing at Imola, where the team suffered excessive tyre wear as well as balance issues throughout the race, finishing behind both Ferraris, who started well outside the top 10 for that event. And the issues didn't stop there, with the team reverting back to their previous more flexible version for the Monaco weekend as early as the back end of FP1, having found major issues getting a good balance with the current less flexible version, thus showcasing just how temperamental their ground effect era F1 cars truly are. And to be honest, I personally have always been in the camp that Mercedes would be the team that faced a greater level of hardship from this change, having just seen how flexible their front wings have been ever since we first were introduced to it last year in Monza. Now, there is a final team that may suffer a little bit as a result of this change, and you need to pay attention to the Aston Martin team, another one that has quite a flexible front wing, which we first saw in pre-season testing this season. But regardless of who this affects the most, all of the teams that have had to have built a new front wing are going to have a period of time through which they're going to have to adjust to the new balance shift within their cars, and it may take them a considerable amount of time to get the balance back to where it was previously. And for some teams, it may not even happen this season, as they have to give up on that as they look towards 2026. So the Spanish Grand Prix weekend is going to be an exciting one for not only the teams but us fans, as we look to see who is greatly affected by it and who is to gain from it. And of course, there is the major potential on our hands that the shake-up can happen with regards to the pecking order of 2025 for the remainder of the season. And that could become a reality this weekend. Only time will tell just how big a shake-up it is and who will benefit from it the most.